Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second day of the third Internationalization Congress, whose central theme is science diplomacy.
Konferencja organizowana jest przez Narodową Agencję Wymiany Akademickiej, a partnerem i gospodarzem wydarzenia jest Uniwersytet imienia Adama Mickiewicza w Poznaniu.
The conference is organized by the Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange, with Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań as the partner and host institution.
Witamy Państwa zgromadzonych w audytorium Maximum w budynku Collegium Juridicum Novum Uniwersytetu imienia Adama Mickiewicza w Poznaniu oraz osoby śledzące obrady dzięki transmisji online w języku polskim na kanale YouTube NAWA, a w języku angielskim na kanale YouTube kampanii Ready Study Go Poland.
We welcome those of you gathered in the Auditorium Maximum of the Collegium Juridicum Novum building and everyone following the proceedings online in Polish on NAWA's YouTube channel and in English on the YouTube channel of the Ready Study Go Poland campaign.
Trzeci Kongres Umiędzynarodowienia poświęcony dyplomacji naukowej wpisuje się w większy projekt agencji pod nazwą Strategia Umiędzynarodowienia Polskiego Szkolnictwa Wyższego i Nauki i finansowany jest ze środków funduszy europejskich dla rozwoju społecznego.
The third Internationalization Congress devoted to science diplomacy is part of a broader project of the agency entitled Strategy for the Internationalization of Polish Higher Education and Science, financed by the European Funds for Social Development.
Przypominamy o możliwości korzystania z tłumaczenia symultanicznego przez cały czas trwania kongresu. Język polski na kanale pierwszym, język angielski na kanale drugim.
We remind you that simultaneous interpretation will be available throughout the sessions, Polish on channel number 1 and English on channel number 2.
Przechodzimy teraz do pierwszego panelu dyskusyjnego zatytułowanego Komunikowanie i strategiczna promocja nauki.
Let's move on to our first panel discussion of the day entitled Communicating and Promoting Science Abroad.
Porozmawiamy o tym, jak skutecznie opowiadać o polskiej nauce światu, budować spójny przekaz i wykorzystywać różne narzędzia komunikacji w relacjach międzynarodowych.
We will discuss how to effectively talk about Polish science to the world, how to build a coherent narrative, and how to use different communication tools in the international context.
Panel będzie także okazją do zastanowienia się, jak współpraca instytucji, dyplomatów i środowiska naukowego może wzmacniać rozpoznawalność polskich osiągnięć badawczych za granicą.
The panel will also be an opportunity to consider how cooperation between institutions, diplomats, and the academic community can strengthen the visibility of Polish research achievements abroad.
Zapraszamy na scenę naszych panelistów.
Let me invite our panelists to the stage.
Doktora Piotra Kajaka, zastępcę dyrektora Polonikum Uniwersytetu Warszawskiego.
Dr Piotr Kajak, Deputy Director of the Center of Polish Language and Culture for Foreigners, Polonicum, University of Warsaw.
Doktor Monikę Koperską, popularyzatorkę nauki.
Dr Monika Koperska, Science Communicator.
Profesor Małgorzatę Myśliwiec, dziekana Wydziału Nauk Społecznych Uniwersytetu Śląskiego w Katowicach.
Profesor Małgorzata Myśliwiec, Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Silesia in Katowice.
Doktora Damiana Syjczaka, zastępcę dyrektora Narodowej Agencji Wymiany Akademickiej.
Dr Damian Syjczak, Deputy Director of NAWA.
Panel poprowadzi doktor habilitowany Łukasz Zamęcki, przewodniczący zespołu doradczego ministra nauki do spraw działań na rzecz promocji polskiej nauki za granicą.
The panel will be moderated by Professor Łukasz Zamęcki, Chair of the Advisory Team to the Minister of Science for the Promotion of Polish Science Abroad.
Thank you. And in line with the moderator, boarding is completed, ladies and gentlemen. We have a slight delay, but we will do our best to arrive on time. Thank you for getting the room ready, and thanks to all those who cut their coffee break short in order to join us. And it's my great pleasure to moderate this panel on international cooperation and communicating and internationally promoting science. So I'll start by introducing the panelists, starting with Dr. Monika Koperska to my left. a popularizer of science, who has worked with the Ministry of Science and won a Fame Lab, a hugely successful in her profession,
Ale
and
chyba
an active
wyłączyłem.
researcher at that. And we'll do our best in order to tap into the wellspring of your rich knowledge. And then we've got Dr. Piotr Kajak, Deputy Director of Centrum Polonicum, Center for the Study of Polish Culture and Language, and we have been joking that I can't really recall all the bodies you are a member of. You're a member of the State Commission for the Certification of Polish as a Second Language. Thank you, Professor. Also with us is Dr. Piotr Kajak. I'm sorry, Dr. Damian Sijczak, Deputy Director of NAWA, the National Agency for Academic Exchange, collaborating with a number of higher education institutions, including as a member of the team of the Ministry of Science for the Polish presidency and the Council of the European Union, was also responsible for contacts with different academic and research entities over that period. Thank you and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And last but not least, Professor Małgorzata Myśliwiec, Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Silesia in Katowice, whose portfolio has been tremendous in terms of international collaboration. So I'll ask you about European universities and how to structure your institutional communication and how to promote and communicate your activities successfully internationally. Let me take my seat and let's start with you, Doctor. Maybe somewhat provocatively, but let's start by asking you about the eponymous communicating and internationally promoting science. Oftentimes, entities popularizing science and academic institutions are at odds somewhat in terms of promoting science abroad and how to do it in terms of PR, publicity, and anything and everything that concerns that. On the other hand, as representatives of the academic community, you've been working with your peers in France, and I guess that sometimes scientists perceive popularization of science as part and parcel of their academic work. How do you see that, and what instruments can be used in order to internationally promote Polish science? Thank you for this provocative question. Indeed, sometimes popularization of science is perceived as getting sidetracked from your main research in order to stage a show for the public. Some researchers perceive it as going far away outside of the scope of their responsibilities. I think, however, that science publicity, science campaigns, and opening to the broad society, be it in Poland or abroad, or to the academic community outside of the country, are indispensable. I mean, what is indispensable in being successful with that is using your publicity potential in order to get more readership, more appeal. In other words, you are very much like a journalist. Again, it's not just science communication, but it's also scientific communication. So the difference between these two terms is essential. We cannot speak of true popularization of science if we don't do science. Ergo, an expert, and only an expert who is grounded in the scientific community can speak veritably as a representative of that community. I've recently worked with Professor Paluszak and with Professor Jim El Khalili, whom you may know from many BBC shows, but he's first and foremost an eminent mathematician. I asked him what sort of um, competences, mathematical competences, are the most important for him, and he said, "Well, as a mathematician, I think it's empathy and emotional intelligence that value to me the most." That's not your run-of-the-mill answer, especially for a person of such high stature. At least not as the words that will roll off your tongue as the first ones when answering these questions. These don't seem to be the typical mathematical competences, and yet he sees them as a pillar of his academic activity. He wouldn't have ended there, he said, and he wouldn't have made the choices he had it not been for his empathy, for his ability to think interdisciplinarily, get outside of his box and, well, expand his horizons further and further as a skilled interlocutor. And so, if you ask about international publicity and promotion, you need to take your environment into account, including fellow scientists, other people, and the broad public. This environment is part and parcel of your activities as a researchers, and you have to keep nudging those around you in order to get them to do what you want. To buy into the value of science, you need to find a common language, a common ground for platforming your message and to get people on board. You can also do it with trust, so it's all about this common language, trust, and visibility. So, in short, science itself, as well as popularization and international promotion, stems from organic scientific activity, a sense of mission. If you do what you do as an expert and you're consummate at that, then you also need to help yourself by communicating your findings. Otherwise, you will get lost in the crowd. So you need to draw bridges and between science and diplomacy, science and mobility, science and post-conference events, like your last night's banquet, which I unfortunately wasn't able to attend because I only arrived here today and I was unable to build these bridges last night. A great shame and regret on my part. So I think due diligence in science and effective communication and publicity go hand in hand together. Publicity is not just a stunt. Those who have such competences, who are successful communicators, should be an integral part of any research team because they are those on whom the onus will fall for communicating the messages. Yes, that corroborates the modern-day model of many research teams indeed. And in the second round of questions, I would like to ask you a follow-up question on the instruments you can use in order to be a successful communicator and networker. Speaking of networking, last night I saw many smiling faces in the crowd when you mentioned that. So hopefully our networking has been successful so far at the conference. Dr. Kayak, you are an experienced internationally as well as a visiting scholar at the University of Toronto, among others, where you also taught Polish culture and Polish language and promoted Polish culture. And based on your experience and expertise, I would like to ask you if you had a sense that you can get people hyped about Poland, Polish culture, Polish research, and Polish science. And secondly, if so, how have you got people excited about it? what sort of messaging have you used? Robert Lewandowski, pierogi, and high alcoholic beverages. You could probably start with that, but jokes aside, as a tutor of Polish as a second language, I can tell you that teaching Polish is part and parcel of political and cultural diplomacy. And I'd use the umbrella term of public information as put by Minister Joanna Skoczek, my good colleague, who stated that any and all sorts of diplomacy can be put into that umbrella term, public information and diplomacy, be it sports diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, science diplomacy, and so on. So we combine these different elements under that umbrella in order to be most effective. So the presence of Polish language worldwide is built using Polish as a second language courses, as well as Polish studies programs. And my deep words of thanks go out to my great colleague, Dr. Damian Sliczek, and the National Agency for Academic Exchange, NAWA, because this is the agency that safeguards Polish interests in terms of retaining great expertise in and of Polish abroad. Last night we were lucky to hear from Professor Kim, who is a graduate of Polish studies himself and speaks perfect Polish. And had we conversed with him a little bit longer, we would have heard that there is a group of experts, ambassadors, counselors, who, as Polish scholars, as experts and researchers, added to our national security. It's not only about political activities, but also about those science diplomats located around the globe. I can't tell you just how many teachers of Polish as a second language we have around the world at the university, but I think it's about 100 around the world. It's not only in the global north, but also in the south. In the west, in the east, I don't know, maybe even the Arctic. We will consider the opportunity. Because Polish culture is immensely attractive to foreigners, and as teachers, we know that it is not merely about declination and plural and singular, because what is more important is your awareness, your consciousness, your understanding of the Polish experience. And so my experience in Toronto and elsewhere in the world, where I have been lucky to teach, is a translation of what I'm an expert in into a common language, into common tongue, be it high culture or lowbrow culture. We use it all because we find it all to have a great pull, a great potential for attracting foreigners to Polish culture. So that's a great grassroots diplomacy, man to man, at the interhuman basis, person to person. Teachers are vital instruments of Polish diplomacy worldwide. That's how I see it. Thank you. I approved this message. You got me on board. Okay, why don't you join our courses or our staff? Well, I think I could use some declination tutorship because I forgot all that since primary school, even though I'm a native speaker. Still, thanks for drawing a bridge and a segue from our yesterday's panels to today. So it's a great opportunity, I think, to thank both NAWA and the Adam Mickiewicz University for hosting us and for organizing this conference. Now, if I may, I would like to ask our next question to Professor Małgorzata Myśliwiec, Dean of the Silesian University, Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Silesia, and the professor. As I mentioned Your first steps in international collaboration took place at the local level. So, how can universities support our communication and international promotion of science, not only in the country but also abroad? Well, how can they do it autonomously? Well, whenever you ask me about autonomy, I'm a Silesian woman, and we stress our regional autonomy every step of the way. We are very proud to be Silesians and to be considered as an autonomous folk. Um, Jokes aside, Dr. Koperska inspired me greatly in her opening remarks, but I think we should also thank the organizers for last night and for the networking, obviously, which was really cool, but also for the official program, for the agenda during our last panel and the film screening. This is what I'm particularly grateful for, because it showed us clearly what um, Polish science is and how it can be promoted. If you take a look at it objectively, Poland as a Central European state with no access to the far global north or far global south suddenly emerged as a highly successful actor in polar research. It has been organic, diligent, in the rooms filled with research papers and in those tiny shacks and shelters built out in the open at the risk of facing a polar bear eye to eye. But I think this experience shows you how you can redefine the perspective of and on Polish science. It's not only about Polish studies, Polish literature, and our 5 Nobel Prize winners in literature, plus Marie Curie Skłodowska, who was another Nobel Prize winner in chemistry and physics. And also, let's not forget Maria Meyer, who was born in Poland and was the second Polish-born female Nobel Prize laureate in physics. And so it's not only about literature. Let's make sure we remember that. And when in 1919, Dana Strickland, third physicist, third female physicist awarded with the Nobel Prize, visited the University of Silesia in Katowice, she was largely overlooked. That was a greatly important event for our local community, and I think we could showcase such facts and such trivia more vocally. So I think that's important, and I think it's also about our redefinition of our successes as a state and the current territorial shape in Silesia as a region. We are home to a total of 12 Nobel Prize winners in physics, chemistry, medicine, true geniuses of global science. And I think as I was tuning into the discussions yesterday, and we were stressing our Nobel Prizes for literature, and yes, we should by all means remember and highlight them. But apart from that, we could also showcase the history of that territory I hail from, which is now part and parcel of modern-day Poland, is also and has laid great merits to global science. So you asked me how you act globally in order to promote Polish science. We joined the Alliance Transfer Europe, which is an alliance of mid-sized universities. We work with Alicante in the Mediterranean, which is a great destination, no explanation needed, as is the University of Lisbon or Trieste in Italy. You know, Illy coffee and many coffee shops, beaches, and quality food need no explanation. And how do we advertise our region, Katowice and Silesia? We started by telling people we are home to We are the cradle of 12 Nobel Prize winners, and that impressed people greatly as a region. Secondly, um, I remember my first visit to the University of Vytautas the Great in Vilnius in Lithuania. And I was participating in a conference in a different field of studies as a visiting scholar. I'm a political scientist. That was a water economy conference, and the guy came to me, the dean of the Faculty of Water Economy at the University of Vilnius, and he said, "Well, do you have any such centers in your region?" And I said, "I was blank." And then I quickly researched that, and it turned out that there was a full hydrological profile of the Vistula and the Oder, two greatest Polish rivers that flow through our region, that was readily available. And there were actually researchers doing research on the condition of water in those rivers. Obviously, uh, they don't usually blow their own trumpet. They do their work quietly, um, and they do their due diligence. And I think I only reached that information because of a catastrophe on the Oder River, where sewage got into the river and polluted a lot of its bed and killed off much of the fish. And suddenly, their work became hailed, even though they did their due diligence. The catastrophe ensued nonetheless, and it gave us, the general public, access and appreciation of their work. Thank you. But more on successful strategies and scientific seduction. You have to get people seduced by attractive hooks in order to make them to buy your story. And thanks. I'll use that phrase, scientific seduction or academic seduction. How do we seduce people? You've showed that at the regional level very effectively. How you do it as the University of Silesia and Katowice at the different levels of promotion. And how researchers do it and how they can be helpful in those efforts. And it's a great way to use the experience of Dr. Damian Sijczak and ask him, maybe somewhat provocatively, how institutions of science and higher education use international communication in the context of some overarching narrative, the storyline as to what you want to achieve through international promotion.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, before I answer the question, there were so many topics that were mentioned that I'm very glad that have been raised. We were thinking about what issues should we actually touch upon in the debates, like communication, promotion. All these things were pretty obvious that these matters should be mentioned. They're pretty relevant enough for all of us to have an input to this topic. And 2026 was by the Ministry of Education was called Year of Popularization of Science. Therefore, all these actions and activities that we discussed here, also in the context of promoting Polish science abroad, will be strongly will be a strong point. There will be also a evaluation. Evaluation. That's always a stressful world for academics. I mean, not necessarily a strict evaluation, but perhaps redefining science and what all of us scientists do every day. And sometimes we don't simply know how to communicate what we do how to communicate that what we do with the society. Nie, spoko, ja ściszam sobie. So we very often work in laboratories, and we do it for some reasons. Like, for example, we have our own scientific interests. Some negative aspects are very often communicated, yet the positive things sometimes stay under the radar of the public opinion. So I think we should put more emphasis on popularizing science and certain important elements of science. And having a framework for that will make things easy for people who popularize science, for scientists, and for the whole academic, institutional academic apparatus. And also maybe we can pump some funds into popularization of science. So I think that what I want to communicate is that 2026, the year of popularization of science, will for all of us be a big opportunity. You professor, you asked about a certain way to communicate not only our programs, NAVA programs, but also a whole Polish science abroad. Well, we do have a lot of institutions dealing with this. For example, Polish Academy of Science Station, Polish. I mean, we have consuls in the. We have Polish language courses abroad, etc. So yes, indeed, teachers of the Polish language, teachers of Polish as a foreign language, not only teach Polish as a foreign language, but also talk about Polish culture, about our history, about our identity. And very often in these centers that I had the pleasure to be a guest in, they are a center of Polishness. So it is not only it's not only about learning Polish language in the lecture room for 2 hours, but they are actually in a way ambassadors of Poland as such. They are diplomats, and perhaps not in a kind of a Ministry of Foreign Affairs kind of way, but they are indeed those individuals who pass on all the information. So there are of course big events organized by NAVA, as you know very well. You participated in those events and science trade fairs, and also universities are usually invited there. We have student programs, PhD programs, scientist programs, academic exchange programs. Whereas what is especially important. Dobra, trudno. So there are also there is also a and there should be a willingness to reach out for the tools that NAVA and other institutes offer and use them for promotional purposes. And one more issue I would like to mention. The professor asked about a certain coordination of the whole promotional initiatives. Yes, indeed, in Poland we have a situation that a lot of institutions, government institutions, deal with similar topics. So the Polish language is a perfect example of that, because not only NAVA, but also Kolbe Institute, Polish schools, programs of the Polish government, all of those activities promote Polish language abroad. We as NAVA, we all see it. We are planning also to organize a round table of all institutions that deal with the Polish language for next year, so that we perhaps can coordinate how our activities under the patronage of the Ministry of Science to somehow organize it and somehow complete each other. Sometimes similar topics are being dealt with simultaneously by multiple institutions. So instead of doing this simultaneous work by different institutions, perhaps we could somehow coordinate these things and maybe promote the Polish language in certain different way. And perhaps doing this in a more organized and systemic way, and doing something together additionally. Perhaps I should also explain that the Director Siczak, is not only dealing with the issues of promoting Polish language, but he also, in his work, in academic work, he also takes up such topics, whereas what is also impressive is the issue that I referred to. So with the big number of institutions that the director mentioned, what's important is the joint narrative and joint initiatives and joint work But in order so these things aren't so easy and light, perhaps let's move on to something more heavy. How are we going to distinguish promotion of Polish science and the promotion of Poland? So it's a question about an instrument. So considering your experiences, rich experiences in popularizing promotion of science and communicating about science, would you be able to point to perhaps certain efficiency of how instruments of promotion are? So which tools are better, which tools are less good? I could do it, but I won't do it because this is going to be very boring. Nobody will remember anything. So let's maybe let me perhaps tell you a few stories. These are very entertaining usually. Recently, well, narrative itself is an instrument, yes, but showed in practice and not defined in the, not defined somehow theoretically. Yes, the history I want to refer to is the history of my conversation with Professor Wolszczan. So this is the professor who discovered the first exoplanets. And this conversation was bizarre. I did it for Professor Dąbrowski from the National Center of Nuclear Studies and the Eureka Foundation that he runs. And the professor asked me to somehow ask the Professor Wolszczan, why didn't he get a Nobel Prize? Yeah, but well, how do I do that? Now that's a tricky thing. So everybody who is a scientist, or at least in some way touch upon the topic of science, asking them a question, why didn't they achieve this something, is a tough question. It may antagonize our interlocutor. So I, in a way, redefined this question and asked the professor, why do Polish people don't get any Nobel Prize in those STEM sciences? And I'm not, and why is that the case? The professor was thinking for a while and said something that opened up my eyes and changed my life. He said that we have all, scientifically, we do everything correctly. We comply with we tick all the boxes, but we don't do what other countries do. We do not teach our scientists how to do networking and like scientific diplomacy. That's why I'm very happy that today we meet under the banner of science diplomacy, because somehow we perhaps can translate this piece of advice into something more concrete, because a Nobel Prize is not a award for the best science of a given scientist. This is just a popularity contest. You vote there. These are elections. And nobody will actually nominate. I mean, very few people can actually nominate those who got the Nobel Prize or those who are professors of the Swedish Academy of Sciences. And actually, in order to become the elite of the nominated individuals, you actually need to know somebody who can nominate. That's just as simple. That's why networking is so easy, so difficult. That's why speaking about science is so important, and being in working the system is so important. Watching movies together, conversing together, all these things are important. Professor Wolszczan has changed my life because I realized that we actually do not know, as scientists, we don't know about this on an institutional level. But, scientists who try to do successful science and somehow and those who try to do science, well, they sometimes do not know about it. And I started talking with my colleagues and I asked the colleagues from Australia, England, whether they have tools like that. Are you guys being taught scientific diplomacy? They said no. And that's why there was a book that was written entitled I Want a Nobel Prize. and scientists there, just like Wolsztan, like Jim Al-Khalili and like Professor Gudowski, they talk how to get the Nobel Prize. And Lech Wałęsa, the Nobel Prize winner, also has some anecdotes that are very interesting. So, indeed, this diplomacy is important. When it comes to tools, I would like to mention that certain tools are important. And everybody has to somehow adjust the tools to your target group. Always when you run a conversation, think about the target group. Think about the tools that they like, and they will get. That's how you're gonna get the best response. Which tools are lacking in Poland? And since I'm traveling all around Europe as part of different festivals, as a mentor, that somehow connects movie makers with scientists, because I do documentary movies and I like doing that. I like my role. I like networking. And sometimes I cannot even do it in Poland. It's hard for me to do this role in Poland. Networking is hard for me to do in Poland because we, Poland, are called a black hole of documentary movies, especially in the field of science. It was hard for me to get funds. It's really difficult to do networking, get funds. The committee that I submitted application to, they told me let the TV do the TV, but the TV program. But I said I do these TV programs. I want to do it. I want to take the viewer outside of the TV. I want to take him to a movie festival, take him to a discussion, take him to a film festival, not just do something for the TV. Somehow compose music to the movie that will make you understand the role of the science and a given discovery. And in Poland, we do not do these things. So if somebody in the room has an idea of what to do to start doing these scientific documents, and I'm not telling you that, yeah, last year there was a documentary movie. No, this is not all about that. It's about having a systemic trampoline and a systemic stairways to making documentary movies, especially those related to science. In the Czech Republic, they do that in tens of movies every year. Arte TV or RTL television in Germany manufactures these movies very often, all the time. We documentary movie filmmakers, we go to the movie festivals to see what the trends are, because we are not part of that system and we are not showing our science in this way, and it would be very nice if we could change that. I very much enjoyed your speech about the documentary movies. Who remembers this this cartoon called About Life, I believe was the original title, and there was like a cartoon about medicine, about life. Every kid liked it, and these things are there are some classic films like this French film about life. Now the question to another panel member. I have a question for you. I hope it will not be a too theoretical question, but I think there is always some tension between locality and universality of science. I think you're the best person to maybe be asked about that, because you do deal with science in general. So, do you see universalism of science and locality of science as two poles, opposing poles, right? How do we combine both things? Like, how do we combine the issues of communication with the local environment and somehow connect it to the universality of science? Well, we either say that Polish language is very difficult and don't learn it because it's too difficult, or we don't make things easy for others, right, to learn Polish. Perhaps we are afraid to promote our language on the international stage. But this initiative is not very fashionable. After the post-pandemic, the world has changed a little bit. But before the pandemic, we organized something called SPTK. You know what is the Polish Academy of Science, and etc. But everybody related to the Polish language science, we met. We met Polish language scientists met from Korea, from China, and from Poland. China, Korea, and Poland. All of the Polish language scientists from these countries met periodically. Of course, Korea and China is far away from Poland, but nonetheless. And Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Jan Jerzy Malicki is our colleague, our friend of this initiative and a co-creator of that initiative in Beijing. And they're in a diplomatic mission. And then Polish language not only is a language of communication of three countries that have, well, different relations, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but this was an area or a platform where we could internationalize Polish language. Also build the position of the Polish language, and build the position of Polish language scientists. We could get cheaper flights. We could use, of course, Skype with time and communicate. People who were doing language Polish studies in Tokyo perhaps could be a little bit could feel better, because in Seoul they could meet colleagues who were dealing with the same topics. So, Tokyo and Seoul are not that far away, and they could converse, talk. Also, they could have, they could strike up international friendships, etc. Also, SPDK could invite people from Vietnam, from Mongolia, and from Indonesia, and from other places. So there are other places we could mention. And Polish language turned out all of a sudden to be an international language. If you have any oppositions to the Polish literature, I strongly encourage you to have a look at the lecture of Tokimasa Sekiguchi, who is telling us why should the book Lalka, which is the doll, you could translate it, he asked the question, why shouldn't this book by Bolesław Prus, why shouldn't it become a canon of world-class literature? So we limit ourselves sometimes because we think that we are a center of the world. Norman Davies called us the center of Europe, right? He called us the heart of Europe. There are many chosen nations, right? We perhaps consider ourselves as one. So I think we should realize that, Polish language might be a space for international communication or a platform for communication. But at the same time, we need to realize that this is a language that is not very popular around the world. People might say, oh, how is that? We have Polish philology, national philology. But of course, listen, we are not the center of the world. There are many languages all around the world. So this shouldn't be so strange. But we do promote our Polish language, in a very competitive advantage, because choosing Polish language is not a business decision. English and other languages are more popular.
And those popular languages will always be preferred because of your mom and dad's preferences. Polish has to stand out and make itself vocal in order to attract speakers. And yes, you can use literature, and one writer who has not been mentioned yet is Isaac Bashevis Singer, a Polish-born Jewish writer who wrote in Yiddish. He didn't write in Polish, but he did describe and did so beautifully Poland and the Commonwealth of Polish and Lithuania and the Jewish community, as well as Germans living in Polish cities. So there are a number of avenues you can pursue, and there's a number of reasons for which people can be interested in Poland, and you should look at it holistically. And you should all think about how you define language, what language means to you personally. There are thousands of definitions of what language is. But what works with glotto the didactics and glottolinguistics has been described perfectly by Dr. Pawłowski of the Wrocław University, who proposed a definition of language that caters to the economic and marketing goals, including those that help you capture the economic, political, dimension of language. And he added in that definition that language is is a subsystem of information which functions within a system of state management and which enables interpersonal social communication in the spheres of administration, economy, culture, which also creates a community of users, its prestige, and its economic potential. Prestige and economic potential are two aspects I think we should pinpoint in this context of science diplomacy that we've been discussing under the umbrella of science diplomacy, which is practiced not only by speakers of Polish language and tutors of Polish language or faculty at Polish departments around the world. But also what we do on a daily basis, we play three pianos, organization, didactics, and science. They do the same, they do it worldwide, and they are our diplomats. I'm not sure if the Minister of Foreign Affairs will include them on his payroll, but we do it as honorary ambassadors or consuls. And we also award important prizes to help popularize Polish culture. And if we can't be financed for that, then we will be grateful if we get appreciation for those efforts. Oh, you brought us a little bit down to earth and helped us understand that Polish has enough speakers in order to help us promote it as a second language. But perhaps not to the degree we project it to be. You are realistic in your assessment, it seems. And I guess our next prize, if we win any, then perhaps we will win it for literature or maybe for peace. Well, you know, that Polish culture is ever present, so I do have a belief that sky is the limit, as the Polish poet Adam Mickiewicz has already proven in his poem Pan Twardowski. Whose protagonist lands on the moon in the Renaissance period. Now, on to Professor Małgorzata Myśliwiec as an administrator of a large faculty and as a person who has access up close to an important Polish university. What would you include as some of the main challenges hindering our collaboration, communication, and promotion? Well, I'd have to start by addressing my predecessor and say, okay, maybe one day our Silesian writer, Szczepan Twardoch, will win Nobel Prize, and he is a vocal Silesian, as am I, and you will have a debate whether that prize goes to Silesia or to Poland, another regional pun on my behalf, and he is a graduate of our alma mater at the University of Silesia, by the way. So one challenge is to get out of the doom and gloom, looking at the ratings internationally. You're absolutely dead right, Doctor. Polish is not your first choice language, for sure, as a second language. But I've recently visited Paraguay in a visit of our Office for International Collaboration, and our the president is a perfect speaker of English as a second language, but it's not a dominant or official language of Paraguay, as we all know. And shortly before his address, they came to us and said, well, don't let the president speak in English, make him speak in Polish, and you the translation, please, because you know our language. We want to hear your language in original, because it sounds very exotic and for us. So they wanted that, and they wanted a Spanish translation, which would have worked better for them. So it is attractive to an extent. Now, speaking of ratings, we obviously compete between the universities among ourselves here in Poland. There is a competition that we all partake in, but we are also assessed internationally as part of a consortia of different universities. So if we are invited to different teams, then it is for the fact that we stand out for many reasons. Mm, Obviously, had it not been for these consortia, many of researchers would not have been able to have their research findings publicized. And if we speak of alliances of European universities, which is a topic that strikes a very dear note in me.
ze szczebla centralnego pomaleńku zaczynamy schodzić. Proszę Państwa, ja pamiętam, bo właśnie akurat Uniwersytet Śląski w Sojuszu Transform for Europe odpowiada za komunikat. I pamiętam, była dyskusja dotycząca
And we had a discussion
instrukcji jest język angielski.
about
W zasadzie w wielu miejscach w Europie.
about English and its role in many different places in Europe. And I know I held a panel of different experts on language certification. I think that if candidates think to become diplomats or consuls, they need to produce two certificates, a C1 for English and a second language certificate, at least at the B2 level. And it seemed clear to me, obviously, in Alicante, they told us, well, we have so many candidates already, and there are so many sessions we have to go through. But Professor Jan Tambor, who also teaches certified courses of Polish as a second language at the University of Silesia, said, listen, if we want to have these people enrolled in exam courses, then these spots fill up in 10 minutes. These courses are popular. So if we speak of certification of your competence in speaking Polish as a second language, as an important working language of the EU, which also opens new opportunities to study in Europe or to work in Europe, as a ticket to the EU, then it is definitely a reason to be proud. But we cannot forget that this language is a ticket to the big leagues, and to an extent, including the Polish diaspora, not only the EU. So on the one hand, we've got a very courageous definition of what sets us apart and what has been our success, as exemplified by Polish polar science, in which our alma mater, the University of Silesia, has been actively engaged. But I was surprised when I saw the body of work of those great people, and I guess the same can be said of what we do administratively. And having said that, I want to be appreciative of the past, which is rich and turbulent in our case, but focus far more so on the future and on using the potential of the Polish state. Okay, so it can be a big step forward. And I need to stress that the University of Silesia does appear as a mainstay, as a staple on our academic map. Ladies and gentlemen, I am trying to do my best to keep the time, and I think we will have enough of it to ask you one question, Dr. Sejczak. As Dr. Kajak has already suggested, with respect to the title of our third Congress of Internationalization, Science Diplomacy, I'll ask you this. You've participated in a number of processes that can be tied to this notion of science diplomacy. So who supports whom to the higher extent? Is it science that supports diplomacy, or diplomacy that supports science to a higher degree? Well, it's a trick question, especially given that we have representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in the room. I think it's a symbiotic relation in which both parties benefit. If there is mutual support between them, then both for political decision makers and the scientists, it all ties together. If we speak of intergovernmental collaboration, then science is a part of a number of contracts, the subject of many contracts and ventures across different fields, including security and defense industry. In fact, a lot of these two start with raw science, with pure research, with what the R&D departments get from universities and what they monetize as military products, as security products. So that's the perfect scenario. We have a synergy between all the stakeholders. Now, so if I may summarize this discussion, this panel, I would say that science diplomacy is a field in which of which we will hear more, for sure. It's a never-ending process. As Professor Myśliwiec kindly mentioned, there are even majors in your own faculty of social sciences, which trains a number of diplomats. And that was an interesting dimension of my visit to your university, where you showed me from up close, firsthand, how Silesia operates, how you Silesians perceive reality. And I think that stressing diplomacy to the extent that, okay, we teach diplomacy and we know that it is crucial. So Professor Piskorska was speaking a lot about the Catholic University of Lublin yesterday and about ambassadors and their practice and how they see their mission and how they promote their work and how they promote Poland on a larger scale. So we see how it all is interconnected. So let's obviously keep in mind the importance of publicity and popularization, but these are not intended as mandatory or as a sort of a penal measure, but rather as an encouragement for you to get more publicity, more following, and to use your research findings as a cog in the great wheel of science diplomacy. What you do is not just for your sake or for that of pure science, but also for the community you're a member of. Okay, what I meant by saying that popularization puts a scare in some scientists meant just that. Sometimes we complained about silos in Poland, about silo thinking and lack of interoperability. So I am all the more grateful for the fact that NAWA has organized this third Congress of Internationalization, and it has opened new dimensions of discussions for the internationalization of Polish science and its parametrization. Yesterday, when we were discussing strategies of internationalization, we heard many words about us, scientists or members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have to get on board comprehensively, so both society and the government can partake of the quality of Polish science. And I think you'll agree with me when I say that this panel has been successful, and let's thank our speakers for their participation and insights. And having said that, as a scientist myself, I'm a big fan of debates and discussions. There are 2 minutes left in our slot, so maybe if there is 1 or 2 very urgent questions or comments from the audience, 2 minutes. If you want to make the best of this limited time, maybe I put a bit of a scare in you by encouraging the raucous applause, and yeah, I'm already prodded by the organizers who whisper about moving this discussion into the coffee break. So this is what we'll do. Thank you for now, and we'll be back with you after the break.
Szanowni Państwo, dziękujemy bardzo panelistom i zapraszamy Państwa na krótką przerwę kawową, która potrwa do 12:30.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to all our panelists and the moderator for this inspiring discussion. And now we are inviting you to a short coffee break, which will last until 12:30. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the next panel of our Congress, we kindly invite all of you, the participants, to join us here on stage to take the family photo. Prosimy uważać na te elementy. Bardzo proszę uważać tu na te elementy.
Wychodzisz, kurde, wchodzisz z deficytem już.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite you to the panel International Cooperation in the Context of Global Challenges.
Przyjrzymy się temu, jak partnerstwa naukowe i instytucjonalne mogą odpowiadać na takie wyzwania jak zmiany klimatu, transformacja cyfrowa czy napięcia geopolityczne, a także jakie kompetencje i mechanizmy współpracy są dziś kluczowe, by wspólnie wypracowywać rozwiązania o realnym międzynarodowym wpływie.
We will look at how scientific and institutional partnerships can respond to such challenges as climate change, the digital transformation, or geopolitical tensions, and which competences and cooperation mechanisms are now crucial for jointly developing solutions.
Moderatorką tej części kongresu jest dr Katarzyna Maniszewska, członkini zespołu do spraw opracowania krajowej strategii umiędzynarodowienia i wykładowczyni na Uniwersytecie Civitas.
This part of the Congress will be moderated by Dr. Katarzyna Maniszewska, a member of the team for the development of the National Internationalization Strategy and a lecturer at Civitas University.
Witamy panelistów.
We would also like to invite our panelists to the stage.
Pana Augusta Jusztura-Ingborsona, dyrektora generalnego agencji RANNIS.
Mr. August Hjøstur Ingborson, Director General of the Icelandic Center for Research, RANIS.
Profesora Krzysztofa Jóźwiaka, dyrektora Narodowego Centrum Nauki.
Professor Krzysztof Jóźwiak, Director of the National Science Center in Poland.
Profesora Tomasza Wojdacza z Pomorskiego Uniwersytetu Medycznego, prezesa Międzynarodowego Towarzystwa Epigenetyki Molekularnej i Klinicznej.
Professor Tomasz Wojdacz, Pomeranian Medical University, President of the International Society for Molecular and Clinical Epigenetics.
Oraz profesor Małgorzatę Łakiewicz, reprezentującą Uniwersytet Szczeciński i Akademię Pedagogiki Specjalnej imienia Marii Grzegorzewskiej w Warszawie.
And Professor Małgorzata Makiewicz from the University of Szczecin and Maria Grzegorzewska University in Warsaw.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me greet our panelists warmly once again and thank them for accepting our invitations. It's my great pleasure and honor to be moderating this panel as a member of the strategy team and University Civitas. I'd like to start with a short introduction on the challenges at hand, which were an integral part of our reflection in the document. We started off with the notion of grand challenges, grand challenges faced by our societies, where science and higher education, as we believe, can help find solutions to address them. Obviously, these challenges are multifaceted and include security threats. They are deeply interwoven throughout the global landscape, not only with respect to hybrid and kinetic conflicts waged, but also with respect to environmental threats that augment the dangers we're facing in this highly unstable environment. And the same goes for demographic crises and migration crises, as well as the leap in technological development in the past few years, which is nothing bad in and of itself, but we have to keep up in terms of our competences in order to make the best use of it. And with that in mind, I'd like to ask our experts to give us an opening statement on the most pressing, most prioritized challenges which science could help address. And since we have Director Ingborson of RANIS, Director General of that institution, I know that you have some reflections already after our last panel on the Arctic. Why don't we start with you?
Thank you very much, and let me repeat what I said yesterday. I'm very happy that I made it to Poland this time. We had some last-minute cancellations for this panel. I won't repeat the introduction, but that I made yesterday. I think most of you were here yesterday, but I just want to highlight the point that, I mean, I just learned that Poland became the 20th biggest economy in the world, and I don't know where Iceland ranks, 100 and something, so we are so much smaller. So our context is, of course, very different from yours. Being so small means that we are even more dependent on international collaboration. I mean, as I said yesterday, we are also hopefully in the process of making our own internationalization strategy.
Przygotujemy własną strategię umiędzynarodowienia.
Difficult to speak with a Polish translation in your ear. So we hope to learn also something from your process. I mean, I don't think I need to repeat the grand challenges. I want to comment though on one aspect of it, is that, and because I think the audience here is to a large extent universities. Universities are also, I mean, not just the traditional challenges of climate change and whatnot, but they're also facing sort of an increasing pressure to de-risk their partnerships, their international partnerships. And I think that's a topic that an internationalization strategy needs to address. In the context of the decoupling from international cooperation is not really an option. And I think I might sort of share here not an Icelandic response to this, but a Nordic-Baltic response, because we are in the process of putting together a call coordinated by Nordforsk. Nordforsk is a Nordic institute that the Nordic funders work with, and we collaborate quite often with the Baltic states as well. So we are launching a call to fund a network of excellence, which is called Responsible Internationalization, Balancing Openness and Risk for Global Leadership. Because I think we realize at the Nordic level we need to collaborate in how we tackle those challenges. So the aim is to fund one network next year for the next 4 years, which will be sort of a platform for collaboration between universities in the Nordic and the Baltic states. And I'm sure we are open to collaboration with Polish universities in that, because, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, we cannot do this alone. In particular, when you talk about how do we approach some of the points you listed for this session, like, you know, whom can we cooperate with? And I mean, not cooperating with the majority of the world. I mean, picking up on Rasmus' point yesterday, I mean, the world is big and the West is small, so we have to collaborate internationally. That means outside of the West. But we have to do so with caution. And how do we do that? And we need practical guidelines also for universities. I think I'll leave it at that. But I'd also, you know, maybe later in the conversation, pick up on several points that have been made here.
Thank you very much for these insights, which we share, I may say, I think, in our team, w naszym zespole, który opracowywał draft strategii umiędzynarodowienia. I całkowicie się zgadzamy, że uczelnie potrzebują
Yes, universities definitely need a wise and so thank you for the input. And universities need need certain guidelines indeed, and certain tips how in order not to reinvent the wheel. So I would like to emphasize this point and somehow relate to what the director mentioned. When it comes to international cooperation, when it comes to global challenges and global threats, we need to, well, respond to them and have a globalized response, which also leads me to the role of science in all of this. So our colleague, Director Jóźwiak, from your perspective, which challenges are actually the most pressing? First of all, I would like to thank you for invitation, and it's a pity that I'm only here today. I was unfortunately busy yesterday. There are many challenges, so-called grand challenges, but I would like to say that I think it would be hard to point to certain particular challenges. Perhaps I could say that the biggest challenge is there are so many of them. and that they are kind of multiplying and redefining our future, that definitely will change very fast. I'm pretty sure that science and higher education in reality is one of the few tools that might deliver proper solutions to most of these challenges. So these environmental challenges, or those challenges related to migration, or all in all other social challenges, it's only science in the 21st century is able to provide solutions which, to a certain degree, will allow us to deal with that. Whereas I would also like to point out another challenge. I would call it challenge. I use the English word challenge. The challenge is related to the fact that the science is under pressure. It's related to the fact that on one hand we have more and more important discussions about security of research, security of doing our activities on universities, and on the other hand, we need to protect scientific freedom, scientific openness, or building building trust, because science is based on trust. And we need to think about how we do the scientific research, how we are exchanging information. All of these things are important as well. And I think that in the fast-changing world, this will also be under pressure. And also somehow we also need to be aware of that, and also build certain tools which will allow us to a greater degree deal with this. And again, this is not one of the solutions is to internationalize science, doing diplomacy, shaping certain global trends, and also using them in doing this very activity. What else? Maybe the more detailed question about how we can prepare our system of education or science system. Well, it should be open to a big degree for good trust, and for international cooperation. Science, there's one science, there are no national sciences. There's just one joint science, and we do scientific research always in such a paradigm. We cooperate with many scientists from many countries, and it's a dissemination of science, peer reviewing, etc. It's all global and international. Grant project evaluation, the same thing. They should at least be evaluated in an international environment, in an international format. Only then do we build valuable science, and at the same time build a system that's characterized by healthy trust between nations, between scientists. Thank you kindly, Professor. So, if I understand, safeguards are important, but the role of internationalization is, of course, also important. Just as the director of Institute Oranis has mentioned. So many of you mentioned pressure. Many of you mentioned the pressure that the higher education and science is under, and I think this is another theme that we might also remember. So, professor from the Pomerania Medical University, from your perspective, I assume that some of these challenges are most pressing, but could you perhaps share your thoughts with us? Well, what I do is I do most of my, most of the things I do, my entire career is based on cooperation, international cooperation and national cooperation as well. All of a sudden, I would honestly have to say that I find myself in a situation where openness that I was taught at the university, like, you know, we want to cooperate, and that was the only priority that we had. Consortium had to start cooperating, right? That was its role. That was the priority. And however, we need to filter that will to cooperate through a filter of trust. Today, in the current political situation, probably trust testing in the very beginning might not be easy. It's a challenge, of course, because none of us was raised in the spirit of questioning the grounds of the very basic and premise behind cooperation, and nobody questioned the goodwill of cooperation. But now, these things, the goodwill of cooperation and the openness, as well as the good faith, are sometimes being questioned. You probably know that certain countries like gather genetic data, right? And of course, once you sequence the genome, you can know a lot about a person. It's a very private data. You can you can determine the diseases, etc. So we started to struggle with this challenge many years ago. There has been some legal regulations in this respect, but there are countries that had certain technologies and were actually even provided services for us, and the data was shipped somewhere, and the data were copied, and we at least assume that the data were copied and they were stored somewhere. You never know where they are, and they can be used. There's a copy of our data somewhere out there. And first we realized it, and then regulations came over. So do we need regulation to actually do cooperation? Perhaps not a regulation, but we do need guidelines at universities. We need to realize that there needs to be communication sent to scientists from the Ministry of Science and Foreign Affairs. It actually did go when it came to Russia. It did go out when it came to Russia, but we very often need to, in the spirit of cooperation, we have to somehow be careful when it comes to our the ground that we're walking on, because the ground that we're walking on might turn out to be thin ice, and we want to avoid such a situation. In the case of genetic data, which is actually the essence of certain projects, we, through our lack of awareness and perhaps lack of willingness to cooperate, we might actually, because of our lack of awareness, we might somehow betray the trust of our citizens, and our data might leak to certain countries that might misuse them. So on one hand, trust, we shouldn't be closing ourselves down to trust, but also we shouldn't be too open with, for example, our genetic and biological data. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. I think that NAVA and ministries, they need to cooperate, and it's very good that NAVA has been working on the strategy and was consulting their findings with ministries and was networking with ministries and trying to figure out the proper system of doing these things. So it's very good that NAVA is doing this and working on certain regulation. Last but not least, now I want to tell you also another thing that perhaps hasn't been mentioned yet. The Madam Professor is created a project called Mathematics in a Lens. Of course, maybe our grand challenges are related to our grand challenges of internationalization, perhaps doesn't relate to it, but maybe Madam Professor can explain to us what kind of challenges you see and what kind of project are you actually running? What is it about? Yes, thank you very much for inviting me here and for letting me be part of a group of such distinguished guests. It's a very big honor for me, and I agree with the gentleman that the group of those biggest global challenges, I would also include the improvement of education. Now, improvement of education might seem trivial, but as part of improving education, I think that I would include the understanding of the relevance of science as a challenge. My entire scientific life I have spent in the Institute of Mathematics of the Szczecin University, And we might say that the interdisciplinarity is something I do on an everyday basis. And let me mention two words. The queen of sciences, that's mathematics, but a very bizarre queen she actually is. A queen has a crown and a chair, and she gives commands to others, right? And indeed, the mechanisms of mathematics actually rule and govern our behavior. Here I think about logical thinking, here I think about commanding, here I think about reasoning. But on the other hand, this queen of ours, it can actually become a servant. A servant to all of us, to all sciences. We are representing social sciences, economic sciences, engineering sciences, medical sciences. Mathematics is giving us something more than just mathematical knowledge. So you can raise your hand. Who of you actually in your everyday life, after you graduated, has used mathematics? Have you ever used this formula? A square plus b square equals c square, or delta equals root from b square minus 4ac. Have you ever used the formulas? Not, probably not, right? But sometimes we might not realize that that mathematics is indeed important. We say that mathematics is like part of our culture that we don't really perceive. We very often think about mathematical thinking, but mathematical thinking can be encoded via mathematics. Mathematics is actually part of our lives, and we need to be precise. Mathematics is precise. It helps us communicate in an efficient way. Mathematics is fighting dogmatism. It is teaching us how to build argumentation, how to convince, how to prove things. But the things that I deal with, mathematical culture, is expanding it into something more, into seeing harmonies and beauty and certain aspects that are ascribed to mathematics, but also being relevant to other disciplines. This includes using patterns in art, music, and other fields of science. The language of mathematics, as well as concrete mathematical knowledge, is important, but what is more important is imagination, creativity. We also very often speak about mathematical elegance, and all these things in our country and also abroad, these things seem to be somewhat forgotten. Education usually boils down to certain tests and results, like for example, remember, memorize, and then forget. Some people do science like that, or study like that. Maybe not do science, but study like that at universities. So our task as popularizers of science is to actually tell everybody what kind of benefits we might draw by thinking about mathematics. So it's not about formulas that you memorize. Everybody said, what about the mathematical knowledge? How we can apply it? How do you want to bring benefits to the society at large? Well, Euclides said to one of his students who asked him, "Dear Euclides, why should I learn this mathematics?" And he told the slave, "Please pay him 1 penny to actually for him to understand why is he learning this mathematics for." Of course, that was a Euclides' joke, but actually mathematics is a task, an overriding global task and a duty of all of us. Yes, I think we all agree that education is indeed a main task, an overarching principle that is somewhat our northern star. This leads me to another topic, the phenomenon of the loss of trust to science, especially in this international environment, which is caused by disinformation. Disinformation, fake news, but also state and non-state actors, which are very much interested in systemic spread of disinformation, social this spreading of disinformation. Question to me, what practical activities we as academic environment can do to prevent disinformation in the field of science, to somehow rebuild this trust, at the same time retaining freedom of research, because that is also very important. So maybe we can ask about Icelandic experiences. Dear director, are you facing the same problems?
I don't think we are facing the same level of disinformation as we hear other people, and particularly sort of in relation to the multi-layered wars, conflicts that are going on in Europe. But my response is how do we react to this is relentless exposure. And this is the role of the scientific community. And after this good speech about the importance of the fundamental science of mathematics, I have to resort to my original training as a philosopher. That was my first degree. I later transgressed into political science, but the sort of the basic canon of the Greek philosophy was discourse, dialogue, and to expose the truth. That was the basic Socrates method. And this is what we as a scientific community have to do in the face of disinformation. And I want to read to you, if that's okay, 2 sentences from the proposal for this Nordic-Baltic network. Universities and higher education institutions have a fundamental responsibility to safeguard and advance knowledge through international collaboration. Mobility, collaboration, and knowledge sharing are prerequisites for quality, innovation, and the ability to address both national and global challenges. So it's not, an easy solution. There's no easy solution to how we tackle spread of disinformation. The only way forward is to have more collaboration. We as academic community, we have to shoulder the responsibility of exposing disinformation, of exposing information which is either taken out of context or is simply false. And we have to step up our international collaboration, not step back. That is, I think, my key message. I mean, it's more important the smaller the country is to have international collaboration. But I think it's also true for other countries. I mean, so we need to escalate mobility, because it is only through mobility that we build up trust. I mean, I think at least when I travel around Europe, I think people agree that one of the biggest successes of the European Union is the Erasmus Plus program, which has, supported millions of people to be mobile. And the idea behind the Erasmus program was, well, let's let the European nations, in particular, the French and the Germans, those who have been at wars over the century, let them get to know each other. They are less likely to go to war with each other. So I think the answer to the difficult times that we are experiencing at the moment is more mobility, more dialogue. And we have to, whenever we as scientists, whenever we see something that is not true, it is our responsibility to expose that.
Bardzo dziękuję za ten głos, który zresztą nawiązuje troszkę do poprzedniego panelu, gdzie była mowa.
Thank you very much for this great insight, which also ties with the previous panel, which was devoted to science diplomacy, among others, which is based on the predicate of people-to-people contacts, and the Erasmus program is, and Erasmus Plus is as well a case in point and the perfect instrument which we can tap into. What you said is also important with respect to social resiliency towards disinformation, and we should see that not only from our local domestic perspective, but also, as you said, internationally. And we have to take a step outside of our own home turf in order to get out of our maybe even transatlantic bubble and take a look at the global south, where our political adversaries are highly active, and we should match them there. Professor Jóźwiak, if I can ask you, as an expert and a member of the National Science Center, are there any possibilities to finance scientific research that would address these challenges as well? Oh, I've been waiting for this question. Having said that, I would say this is true, and this is a serious challenge. And in a nutshell, the answer to that question would be that the world of science, the world of educator, should be proactive and take utmost care of the high quality of its research, education. So let's keep our due diligence, and we know that our adversaries, I would even use a stronger word, but let's stay with that. Our adversaries take no prisoners here, they have no scruples, and they are relentless. So our best defense in this context is to conduct quality science, communicate quality science, and offer top quality education based on scientific achievements, so that we can offer a counterweight to the different stakeholders that would very much like to use this information against us. This also touches upon other fields of our activity in the academia. We need to counter the efforts towards fostering distrust towards the academia, which is pictured as too complex, verbose, an ivory tower, and so on. There's a lot we can do to counter that narrative. And oftentimes, those anti-scientific propagators of pseudoscience use our own tools to defy our discourse. So I guess this makes our job all the more difficult. Still, we need to do the utmost in order to safeguard top quality of our work at research institutes, universities, and persons who popularize science. And when it comes to the question regarding financing, I must tell you that at NCN we are financing research whose topics are proposed by scientists themselves, of course. We offer grants in response to those proposals, and those research proposals can be successfully implemented under NCN grants. This is an integral part of our activity, which fosters social development and economic development as well. Thank you very much, Professor. And tuning in to your insights, what I think we're also dealing with is intensive attempts to discredit the academia by bad actors who use disinformation for different purposes. Maybe I should ask you all about how this disinformation ecosystem saws the division and more conflict internally in different countries, not only in Poland. So I guess the more of those practices we see, the higher our responsibility, the greater our responsibility to counter them as an academic community. And the greater onus falls on our quality of work. So, Professor, I'll start with you. I guess this is to Professor Tomasz Wojdacz. We've spoken about communication in medical sciences and their broad dimension, especially in the post-pandemic reality. And I remember that even the WHO coined the term infodemics. So an informational pandemic or pandemics in the different inflections and types that emerged during the pandemic and projected negatively and adversely on our health security and economic security as societies. And a lot of costs have been incurred as a result of that infodemics. and those bad practices. So how do we counter disinformation in this context as well and get people to trust us? I will continue in the grain of Professor, Director General Ingberson and Professor Tomasz Wojdacz, who spoke of excellent science and relentless exposure. And I think we should do just that. And in order to be effective in those two avenues, we should be good communicators. And that's where I see a weakness. None of us, mostly here in Poland, as academics, are taught how to communicate clearly. And this is most valid for medicine, for example. If you think of doctors and how they communicate and say, well, according to scientific evidence, your condition is, they will lose the patient immediately. Because the patient will have, some pseudo therapies instantly available online. They've got their agony aunts and grandmas who will advise them how to tackle it in an understandable way, the one that they understand, even though it may be faulty and pseudo-scientific. You cannot use this super highbrow discourse in order to communicate complex disease to your patients. You have to do excellent science, but you have to communicate it simply, clearly. So education, again, in this aspect, so educating researchers and academics to communicate their message not only vocally, but also understandably, should be an absolute priority in the current geopolitical situation. Because the way you communicate your findings, even though you may have best intentions, will completely be overlooked by your interlocutor if they don't know this meta-language. And we are not taught that. We are not taught to communicate clearly. So communications is an absolute cornerstone. And you should also dress up properly if you're a scientist. You don't want to fall into that a wacky researcher stereotype. You don't want to wear your flannel shirt. You want to be well-dressed and presentable, because otherwise people will not look at you seriously, at least in some context. And the other party will immediately make memes of it and will discredit you. So in my career, I've seen the importance of communications firsthand. The way how I perceive myself is based on peer review. I want my peers to review my efforts and to see them as adequate. Even creating a Wikipedia profile is not something that we see as super ethical, but it's important if you want to publicize your findings again. In the audience, we see Kasia Zamaro, who has been working with my association to help us communicate. And, I'll tell you that we only started to be effective as an association once we translated those new developments and the research field I'm active in into a clearly understandable message in a normal, understandable language. And we could only do that when we joined forces with skilled communicators of science. That was my limitation. That had been my limitation before I decided to join forces with them. And it's absolutely essential in order to help counter discreditation of science and to get our message across. Thank you, Professor. And now I would like to ask Nava for helping out higher education institutions. In that, we had a training and a workshop held today in the morning by Anna Kiria Fraska. So this is the pragmatic dimension that we all direly need, but what we also need is radical mediaization of the public sphere and how to navigate there, how to read and understand the contents created critically, how to think critically in order to be resilient to manipulations. And that seems key, not only at the level of higher education institutions, but also at the level of different ministries. Okay, and you would like to add some follow-up, right? Yes. Well, we do have allies in this regard. We have professional popularizers of science. There's quite a lot of them. They are highly effective professionals. They have millions of followers. We should support them and work with them because they are more than willing to work with us, academics and nerds, and help us translate that message. And this is a positive way of working that we can use. And let's move on to Professor Małgorzata Makiewicz. My favorite disciplines, mathematics, for example, and exact sciences as well as medicine offer us a fabulous first aid kit in terms of resilience to disinformation and manipulation. And what I have in mind is we have to define the notion before we use that notion practically. So we want to avoid tautologies, we want to be capable of reading graphs and graphic data, analyzing data in fine print, in following a coherent train of thought, especially multi-layered utterances. Scientifically, I deal with intersemiotic considerations behind the crisis of education in Poland, and the preliminary research findings of this project have corroborated our hypotheses, but they've also extended to show us a whole new degree of this problem, namely the expectations of different individuals, those who have graduated already and those who are still being educated, and their expectations towards knowledge, its transfer, and its commodification. So using knowledge as goods that can be transferred from one mind to another, but rather provoking towards the creation and generation of knowledge in the mind of others. And so one of the ways to help generate that knowledge is our project, the Mathematic Lens. Let me take you back to in 1839, which was the first time we saw a photograph, an image not painted by a human being, but produced, manufactured using light. Photography has not appeared to theater, painting, or sculpture by any means, but in the recent years, photography has witnessed a rapid development in terms of its development. I don't think of the wet photography that we used in the past in the dark rooms, but rather digital and democratically accessible photographs of the past decades. Like you see in this room when people lift their smartphones, take a snapshot and send their post onto their social media page and communicate it across the globe within a matter of milliseconds. So why did I mention photography and the photographic lens? Because every one of us carries a smartphone, which is also a camera, and we all keep taking pictures and snapshots and photographs of all kinds of objects and phenomena. We archive different facts, store them in order for us to have a handy archive of images that will substitute for memory. We photograph beautiful landscapes, flowers, objects, beautiful people, and so on. And whenever somebody important comes, let's say, to our city of Szczecin, we commemorate it using photographs. We also commemorate important events in the lives of our children, those breakthrough moments, their first steps, and so on. So photographs can be used personally and also broadly, publicly, as an auxiliary in promoting science, which can transcend its limitations, because images are universal to the extent that they combine different cultures. They can translate content from one culture to another. Some visual metaphors in mathematics, for example, are completely understandable in countries in which the, let's say, domestic mathematic discourses can help justify the visual and the verbal combined into one. You can use photography to promote that. And back in 2010, I organized a competition, which was a provocation of sorts, intended to help attract more young people to mathematics and the general population to mathematics, and it seems to have worked to an extent, because right now, overall, in all editions of the competition, we have attracted the grand total of 170,000 submissions, and this year alone, we had 14,000 entries in the competition. And one example of manipulation or disinformation in the context of this photographic mathematics competition occurred 3 years ago, and it was noted by the general public, including the National Geographic competition, which also mentioned that. We saw photographs that seemed very veritable and looked like they were made by humans, but they were images created by AI at the end. And well, this is a calendar with photographs, and the idea was that we should include AI graphics as a discipline for those who wanted to fiddle with this new tool. This was a very intriguing idea, and we had 500 submissions for the first time. Then this year, 1,500 submissions. It was great. It seemed great, but it didn't protect us from attempts to manipulate or cheat the other category, the human-made photos.
This year's work was about, in a photo group, to pick works not done by a computer. We have a whole list of, varied list of different tools, more or less popular in our country, and the point of showing with an image the power of mathematics is important. If we try to explain something to things, and the method is just to repeat or speak something louder or more clearly, then our efficiency is low. My interviewees told me about the cognitive trampoline. Try to detach from the world you really are, because then you have more chances to reach many people. Depart from your favorite mathematics, where everything is so ordered, and move on to the world of art. Well, it's hard for me to say that a world of art is done between 8:15 and 9:25 in a school with a formal setting. This freedom gives those people who actually submit the works for the competition, they give them this freedom gives them a boost. I also was invited to show the works from my exhibition on the next meeting. Hopefully I will do that. I will have a ability to do that. So this freedom that we give people gives them a chance to break through barriers and break the mold. Thank you kindly. Thank you kindly for pointing your attention to a very important aspect related to the visual aspect of communication. And in the international communication, I think that sometimes the visual aspect is even more important than words. Some people say one image speaks more than 1,000 words. You started talking about AI. I also have one thing that is related to AI that I would like to ask you about. But before I do it, I have the question to the Renis, the Institute Director. Since we have you here as our guest, I wanted to ask about the experiences of Renis, lessons learned and best practices. And when it comes to addressing these big challenges that that society faces. In the context of international cooperation, perhaps you had some projects that you were especially proud of, that maybe were well organized, or maybe some lessons learned. What was a failure, and what kind of conclusions we can draw on that?
Thank you for that question. I mean, given how limited our scope is, I mean, I don't think I have a lot of good examples from us. We are very much catching up when it comes to AI. We have recently funded sort of strategic targeted research program on how to tackle that in communications. But is it okay if I reflect a little bit on both the last session and this one on the importance of communication? Driving from Warsaw to here, I saw a number of military vehicles being transported. And this is a reality, you know, that you have here in Poland and we don't have in Iceland. We don't have a military. We have others to protect us. We provide a NATO base. So you know what to do when confronted with a military threat. You move in the military, and all our countries have agreed to increase the spending on military. But when you are confronted with an information campaign that's directly aimed at eroding the basic values, at eroding the credibility of science, who do you send? And this is, I mean, this is in the context of what I said before. I mean, do we need a new type of a soldier, a scientist specially trained in tackling misinformation campaigns? I don't have the answer, but it's and I think, I mean, we who are colleagues at the Science Europe, which are the European funders, maybe we need to consider in dialogue with our governments. We are funding basic science, we are funding applied science now, we are increasingly funding dual-use technology. We somehow have also to be in a position to fund more science communication in this context, where science communication at various levels is needed to safeguard the societies that we value. Because this is also quite a lot about value. And again, a small society like Iceland does not have the means to do that alone. So that again brings us to international collaboration. And if I may pick up on a point that we only briefly touched upon, you mentioned the Global South. I think in the context of the European programs that we participate in, the Erasmus program and the Horizon Europe programs, we should use them more strategically to enhance the European international global cooperation. We have a small, I mean, they are open in principle to the Global South, for instance, but they're not actively engaged. The Erasmus program is open, but with a very small envelope of funding. This is something that we as European countries could do, is to increase that as part of sort of strategic outreach. And finally, again, on the point of communication, I wanted to pick up on the Arctic session, Arctic and Antarctic session yesterday afternoon. And I wanted to use this opportunity because this is probably my last intervention here. I think the Polish contribution to Arctic and Antarctic science is very impressive. I know there's a long-standing history there. And it's impressive partly because you don't have vested interests. Like US has vested interests, China I think feels they have vested interests. You don't have the same vested interest. So your contribution is, quote unquote, more honest, if you like. And you need to promote that internationally, not just to the members of the Swedish Academy, although you should do that actively, but you need to promote the scientific contribution of Poland to the global science community effectively. And I think that should be part of your national strategy. And I mean, the bigger you become, now 20th biggest country, you know, you need to promote, you need to put some resources to that sort of promotion. That needs to be an important part of your foreign policy presentations. I mean, Iceland, we do the opposite in the Arctic. I mean, we do not contribute a whole lot of scientific knowledge in the Arctic context. We rely on knowledge produced by others, but we offer ourselves as the ground for dialogue We have the Arctic Circle, which is the biggest Arctic conference held annually. And there are some discussions going on, and I hope that we will bring that Arctic dialogue, because we organize forums as well in different countries. And there are some preparations, I hope, for bringing the Arctic Circle Forum to Poland in 2027. So I'm hoping that is how we could collaborate. But again, we come back to this point. Communication is vital in the face of the challenges that are the topic of this session.
Bardzo dziękujemy, panie dyrektorze. Widzę, że są głosy. Widziałam, że pan dyrektor też
Thank you. I see the director is making notes, taking notes as well. So I'm very happy that you mentioned that this choice has to be made strategically, because this is how our strategy should be. We should strategically pick the topics that will be the Polish brand, that will strengthen the Polish brand. I just want to add one thing. The fact that science might become a goal of war or a conflict. Not many people realize that this is the case. And all the safeguards are important. We as scientists don't even realize that this is a thing that we need to consider, because our goodwill might be abused by the opposing party. And we need to realize that we might become a goal or a target of the war. And I don't seem that we all understand these topics this way, because I honestly have to say that I've never thought about things in this context. I don't know how today what I do can be used in this war, but I think it can be used. Of course, strategic approach of the state to assistance and maybe helping in terms of competences is important, right? We university people also, of course, sometimes don't realize certain things are the status quo, and perhaps the ministry could help us realize these things. Maybe they can train us, etc. Maybe make us realize that there are some threats and opportunities as well. Yeah, so technology dual use, right? And studies that are dual use type studies. They are something that's the backdrop of what we talk about. 50, 60 years ago, dual use were atomic energy, microbiology, and potentially maybe some nerve gases, and that's it. Now it turns out that the dual use potential is in many research, especially in those research that we don't even think about. Like, for example, how to use new technologies to spread disinformation. And this is exactly how this is. And this will only become stronger because each and every one of us has to be aware that actually this research that we do, they might be abused and used in an improper way. And this is a big challenge. And in this context that I have mentioned, a special role is played by humanistic sciences and social sciences, which stereotypically could be considered as safe. It seems that, first of all, this might not be the case. And social sciences and these types of fields of study might help us provide certain challenges to overcome future, may help us face future challenges, or maybe even tackle disinformation attempts in the future. Additionally, International Science Center, our group, was also participating in the so-called CHANCE partnership. And soon we will be starting or coordinating another partnership that is directed at these types of challenges. It's called ESTER, but it's like a social transformation and resilience. So it's something that corresponds to the challenges and research and these types of research in the future. There is a significant amount of funds devoted to that by EU and us. And these challenges might again be addressed only through good qualitative science run by many countries in a very strict cooperation. However, take into consideration the fact that there is, of course, the risk of dual use, and the results of these studies might be abused by somebody. Again, so we're coming back to the theme of social resilience and our awareness, which at the end of the day might be of key importance. People say with great responsibility, Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility, and I think this is how it goes with the science environment as well. We rarely realize that this is the case, and rarely realize what kind of power we wield, as well as what kind of responsibility we have. Since we've had a signal from the director that we should be finishing, we still have 3 minutes. I don't want to leave you behind with without questions, so maybe one question or one comment, okay? And to our experts, and this is the time to do that. Do it quickly because we have to wrap it up. No questions, no comments. Fantastic. Since there are no comments, no questions, thank you kindly. I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank you for coming from Iceland, and thank you for joining our panel.
Szanowni Państwo, dziękujemy bardzo za niezwykle interesującą dyskusję.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this truly interesting discussion.
A teraz proszę o zabranie głosu panią profesor Bogumiłę Kaniewską, rektora Uniwersytetu imienia Adama Mickiewicza w Poznaniu.
And now we would like to ask Professor Bogumiła Kaniewska, rector of the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, to say a few words.
Szanowni Państwo, drodzy goście Kongresu Umiędzynarodowienia, który odbywa się, właściwie kończy się już w tej chwili w Poznaniu. Jest mi ogromnie przykro, że nie mogłam Państwa wczoraj powitać.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that I couldn't say hello yesterday.
Zupełnie niezależnych ode mnie okoliczności sprawił, że
But unfortunately, because of a coincidence, I wasn't able to to come yesterday, but I had to come here today.
zaskoczenia tego, jak bardzo cieszę się, że gościliście
I'm very happy that you have joined us here at our university, at the Institute of Law and Administration. We would like to thank the dean and thank his co-workers. I hope that you've had a good time. I hope that you enjoyed your stay here. And I hope you had interesting debates and content-rich debates. We, as the University Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, we always want to be part of the internationalization initiatives. We are very much interested in this international cooperation, and also we would like, all deans who are part of this conference, we all want to surely strongly cooperate with NAVA in this respect, and I hope that you directors
już się dzieje. Także bardzo serdecznie
you can confirm that this is already the case. I would like to thank you for your presence. I'm very sad that I couldn't have listened to the discussions.
przed momentem wysłyszeć było ciekawe i
What I have heard so far was very inspiring and very interesting and important because we are not talking because in an empty, we are not just talking in an empty space. We are talking with the we are talking with and in the presence of a lot of distinguished experts, and we all talk about cooperation. The cooperation is important. It needs to be there, and it is for us very important. Thank you kindly once again. I wanted to say hello and goodbye at the same time, just like the Beatles. And ladies and gentlemen, remember that in Poznań, you always will be warmly welcomed, and you can invite your guests here from Poland, from abroad, from all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now what's left is to summarize the Congress.
Na scenę zapraszam profesor Agnieszkę Chłoń-Dominczak, przewodniczącą Rady Narodowej Agencji Wymiany Akademickiej.
We would like to ask first Professor Agnieszka Chłoń-Dominczak, Chairwoman of the Council of Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange, to the stage.
Szanowni Państwo, umiędzynarodowienie nauki jest właściwie w naszych genach, tak? Nie możemy prowadzić nauki, jeżeli nie będziemy jej prowadzić w międzynarodowym kontekście. I tak jak to było mówione przez te 2 dni, musimy robić wszystko, żeby po pierwsze mieć możliwość, szansę i dobrą współpracę z naszymi partnerami międzynarodowymi, tworząc razem naukę. Jak w ostatnim panelu było powiedziane, dużo się dzieje, jeżeli chodzi o rozważanie na temat wyzwań, przed którymi stoi świat, megatrendów związanych z demografią, którą ja się zajmuję, odpornością społeczeństw, odpornością gospodarek i właśnie dzięki temu, że działamy w kontekstach międzynarodowych, nasz głos jest słyszalny, chociażby przez udział w projektach, które właśnie takiej odporności dotyczą. Zespoły polskie z Uniwersytetu Warszawskiego czy z mojej macierzystej uczelni biorą udział w projektach europejskich, które właśnie patrzą na kwestie związane z odpornością społeczeństw, co jest możliwe dzięki temu, że działamy w sieciach międzynarodowych, że upowszechniamy naszą informację. I myślę, że to, co Państwo tutaj mówili, czy mówiliśmy przez te 2 dni konferencji, bardzo wyraźnie pokazują, że to jest istotne. Istotne jest to, żebyśmy my komunikowali się właściwie do bardzo różnych środowisk i ta dyplomacja badawcza jest bardzo istotna, kiedy mówimy między sobą, kiedy staramy się nawiązywać współpracę z innymi badaczami w innych krajach, ale także kiedy komunikujemy do społeczeństwa i kiedy komunikujemy do decydentów, czy komunikujemy do instytucji, które finansują nasze badania. I bardzo ważne jest to, żebyśmy umieli się komunikować w sposób, który pozwala na to, żeby ci inni nas rozumieli, żebyśmy wychodzili ze swoich wież z kości słoniowej, gdzie bardzo lubimy się zamykać w naszym specyficznym, hermetycznym języku, bo wtedy nikt nas nie zrozumie. Musimy mówić to w języku, który dotrze i który także potrafi przekonać, że nauka jest konieczna. Kilka lat temu rektorzy uczelni ekonomicznych zlecili badanie czy analizy, które pokazały, że inwestycja w naukę oznacza de facto rozwój i rozwój gospodarczy, czyli każda złotówka wydana na naukę oznacza ileś złotych.
Takie badanie było robione i wyszło, że właśnie tak nie jest. Czy takie badanie czytałem?
Musimy też komunikować, że inwestycja w naukę jest inwestycją, która przynosi realny dochód i w sytuacji, kiedy bardzo ciężko jest znaleźć te środki, to nauka nie powinna być tym miejscem, gdzie się oszczędza. I to jest także rola dyplomacji naukowej i zarówno w tym kontekście krajowym i międzynarodowym. Znaczy, mam wrażenie, że jak pan premier Tusk pojechał na spotkanie w Europie, gdzie mu wszyscy premierzy powiedzieli, jak ważne jest inwestowanie w naukę, to też inaczej ta komunikacja wyglądała. Więc życzę Państwu dobrej komunikacji, dobrej dyplomacji naukowej, dobrego komunikowania o naszych badaniach do szerokiego środowiska naukowego i budowania tych relacji, które skutkują tym, że polska nauka będzie coraz bardziej widoczna, coraz bardziej rozpoznawalna i nasze efekty będą nam dawały satysfakcję. Także bardzo Państwu dziękuję za inicjatywę, za te 2 dni rozmów.
So thank you very much for your initiative, for the 2 days of discussions, debates, and sharing your best practices and networking, which is an inherent part of science diplomacy. Thank you for inviting me, and hopefully I'll see you soon at our next Congress.
O słowa podsumowania poprosimy również pana profesora Tomasza Nieboraka, dziekana Wydziału Prawa i Administracji Uniwersytetu imienia Adama Mickiewicza w Poznaniu.
We would also like to summarize the Congress, Professor Tomasz Nieborák, Dean of the Faculty of Law and Administration at Adam Mickiewicz University.
Your Magnificence, Madam Rector, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it has fallen on me to address this noble audience at the end of the Congress and to synthesize these 2 days of debate, which is no easy task, considering that we have spoken on many different issues. Nonetheless, I have been taking notes duly over the course of these 2 days, and I will keep analyzing these bullet points and the insights I've learned, including the ones communicated over the course of the last panel. Firstly, as you can see, the question at hand is how to effectively develop science diplomacy and the internationalization of Polish science. It's a question, and the question mark suggests that we are going to try to look for answers. So, first and foremost, we wanted to consider what science diplomacy is. The very notion is difficult to define easily. Well, when one of the great thinkers of our era was asked about time, he said, well, I don't know what time is until I feel that it has passed. Diplomacy, science diplomacy, is a peaceful measure towards a more stable world, and we often use it whenever policy and politics fail us. We mentioned the Erasmus program, and I am sure that each and every one of us here in this room have benefited from that program more than once. It has redefined the horizon of our European perceptions, as has the European currency, the euro. You see, whenever you travel and mobilize yourself to move between different academic centers, how well it operates. And it's also part of science diplomacy. So science diplomacy is also the application of science as a tool of foreign policy and international relations. This has been one of the more important aspects considered. And you can systematize science diplomacy in 3 dimensions. First, science and diplomacy. So how does science influence diplomacy and international politics? One great example today and yesterday has been polar exploration, which seems very remote, but it is inherently connected to diplomatic efforts of different states. And the visionary project we discussed yesterday hopefully will be supported by Poland in terms of the exploration of Greenland. And surely we should invest in different components, and the financial expenditure is great, but the after effects are even more spectacular. And then diplomacy facts, an important facet in which diplomacy serves the growth of science, and we saw yesterday how even minor grants can start a snowball effect and inspire collaboration between different academic centers around the world. Some examples I have in mind for 2 dimensions of science diplomacy include the first dimension, domestic, national, in how we tackle different local challenges, our policy towards student body, researchers, preventing brain drain, as well as the external facet, the second facet, or the global one. How can we promote our science effectively on the international arena, and how do we strive for excellence and for the highest standard? And we have agreed that any political missions abroad should be accompanied not only by the representatives of the business sector, but also those of the academia. And a second example concerns Polish as a second language. I've met many persons who studied in Poland back in the 60s and 70s, especially in the city of Łódź, which had the first academic center to teach Polish as a second language before developing this initiative into a nationwide program. And those alumni of those programs are now active Polish ambassadors in Africa or in Vietnam or elsewhere. And thirdly, the third dimension, science for diplomacy. So we establish relations between countries and, more importantly, trust between countries and different stakeholders. Also important to mention would be the aspects used in developed countries that have harnessed science diplomacy for a long time, like Außenwissenschaftspolitik in Germany, which has been largely successful, and this is something we want to emulate at NAVA, where we see science diplomacy as an international instrument for the strengthening of Polish soft power and resolving conflicts in a bipartisan or non-partisan fashion. And secondly, the need for autonomous intermediary institutions, such as Max Planck's Gesellschaft or DAAD in Germany. They can help create a system that will be resilient to political pressures. And my third thesis would be science as a connector rather than confrontation. ESA and CERN initiatives in polar exploration policies are the best examples. What I've also witnessed in our discussions has been how we conceive of science diplomacy. Should it be centered or country-centered? We should focus on competences rather than countries, although one caveat here, for me as a scholar of law, we tend to perceive the reality through the transatlantic lens, ignoring such countries in the south hemisphere, in the southern hemisphere. And fourthly, we can use science diplomacy as part of hard power. And last but not least, we have the skill of combining our national interest and international interest, and using science diplomacy as a platform for the exchange and networking, and including exchange of data. And to address the remarks in the respective panels, I could offer a brief reflection on how to translate this into our Polish reality on the ground. In the panel on the promotion of science, one person offered a perspective wherein we should all work towards building the ethos of researchers and academics, an ethos of perceiving us positively. So the human factor is exquisitely important. When I look at the TV screen during any televised panels, I see that our debates are far behind those held in Western European countries in terms of experts' discussions. And then another aspect is the dispersal of science and how to navigate through the complexities of our landscape. We've got NAVA, we've got the ministry, we've got the other ministry, and yet another ministry. So interministerial approach would be important, and that should be combined with long-term planning. And drawing to a close of this summary, the relation between soft power and hard power, which we've pinpointed, we know that soft power is an instrument for great reputation, prestige, mobility, educational activity, advanced research infrastructure. And as a host of this institution, let me briefly mention two examples that we understand as case in point for soft power. Thanks to the kind support of our president of the Army's University, Bogumiła Kaniewska, we can implement such projects as this one. Oh, this is something we're really proud of as the Faculty of Law and Administration. The Foundation of Law, an edited collection of essays by our faculty on different foundations of law in collaboration with the Artistic University of Poznań. A beautifully edited publication, one that won a prize for the design of its book cover and its contents. We combine and pool resources of different inflection, artistic and legal, thinking interdisciplinarily in order to highlight Polish science as well as Polish artistic output. And the second example another example would be this beautiful album that is called Hello Konstytucja, Hello Constitution. Another project that we developed to harness our skills of legal scientists and the artists of the neighborly University of Artistic University of Fine Arts to highlight the quality and importance of our Polish constitution and to promote its values. So much so for soft power, but moving on to hard power, obviously infrastructure is important, inviting, homely, and spectacular to us here, but also hopefully impressive to some of our guests who are visiting faculty. Other elements of hard infrastructure are our military and economic advantages and competitive edges and durable and resilient supply chains. To sum up, in my opinion, we have arrived at the conclusion that, firstly, structuring science diplomacy and the world of science without stability will lack credibility, and that credibility is a currency of contemporary diplomacy. We need to think horizontally, we need to be dreamers, and we need to dream big and think of Polish science in the global context and continue in the grain of this mission of science, ergo creation, ergo support, and hopefully the decision makers politically will invest in open, courageous, and partnership-based science in Poland. And I'd like to thank at this opportunity the director, Dr. Wojciech Karczewski of NAWA, who has kindly supported these initiatives with his entire team, and we have been delighted to act as the host of this third Internationalization Congress here at the Faculty of Law and Administration. And hopefully these two tokens of gratitude, these two minor elements of our own soft power at the Army's University, these two publications, I would like to present to Her Magnificence, Madam President of the Army's University, and to Dr. Karczewski of NAWA.
We would like to thank you very much, Dean Professor Tomasz Nieborak, for this acquaintance and the essence from the content of our today's Congress.
Szanowni Państwo, pragniemy podziękować wszystkim uczestnikom za naprawdę wyjątkową atmosferę i życzyć Państwu spokojnego powrotu do domu.
And we would also like to extend our gratitude and acknowledgements to all of you for being here with us and for this truly unique atmosphere that you created.
Mamy nadzieję, że spotkamy się z Państwem ponownie na 4. Kongresie Umiędzynarodowienia.
We hope to see you again during the 4th Congress of Internationalization.
Do zobaczenia.
See you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And from your interpreters team, make sure to return the earpieces, the interpretation sets downstairs at the reception desk. Thank you very much.
We are closing the online broadcast of this event, and all of you who are gathered here are kindly welcome to participate in lunch in the lobby.